Welcome to the Matchbook Horse Racing Podcast, which today and for the foreseeable, all the way through to Royal Ascot, is going to be Royal Ascot centred. We have a couple of weekends that build into Royal Ascot, which perhaps don't sort of get us too excited with regards to what goes on in the weekend action. For all this, some very good fare, but we felt it was about high time we turned our attention towards Royal Ascot and the action that we've got coming our way in about 10 days' time now. So we'll do it in two instalments, essentially. And we're going to look at, on this Matchbook Horse Racing Podcast, we're going to look at the first couple of days of Royal Ascot. So that's going to be the four Group 1s across the first 2 days, starting with the Queen Anne, culminating with the Prince of Wales on the Wednesday. Then next week, we'll have our second Royal Ascot Matchbook Horse Racing Podcast. We've seen Micháel. Deasy is there. Hi, Deasy. How are you?
Very good, Tom. Very good. Just adjusting my seat there at the worst possible time.
You've got to get comfy.
Yeah.
You've bedded in. Rory, how are you? All well?
All well, yes. Yeah, in the process of moving houses, you can probably see if I move things around. So it's a little stressful at the moment, but hopefully all in hand.
We're going to look at, in this order, the Queen Anne, the first of the Group 1, the first race of Royal Ascot 2019. We'll then kick on to the King's Stand. We've got the St James's Palace and the Prince of Wales as well. So, without further ado, Micháel, you've got some prices for us for a very open Queen Anne with a ridiculously priced favourite. Kick it off, please.
That ridiculously priced favourite is Le Brevido at 5.0. Then you have the Lockings winner Mustache at 6.0. Bernie Roy is 8.2. Lawrence is 9.0. Accidental Agent is 13.0. Zabil Prince is 17.0. Hey Gammon is 17.5. And big prices the rest.
So Le Brevido heads the betting from Mustache, his comfortable conqueror. I don't even know why I've talked about him even in the race. Le Brevido, he just ran on from the rear, having been slowly away and found lots of trouble. But Mustache can't head that betting because Le Brevido does. Discuss, Rory Delargy.
Yeah, well, Le Brevido was a big talking horse for the Queen Anne before he lined up on the Lockage, and we've seen Aidan O'Brien several times in the past inherit horses and aim them at the Queen Anne with some degree of success, but using the Lockage as a stepping stone and not necessarily being at the best for that Group 1 at Newbury. And a lot of people just are buying into that the game plan again, that he wasn't quite, he'd been off the course for a long time. He'd had a warm-up, was it in the Gladness Stakes prior to that, and he was still rusty. You could see through the race he was doing plenty wrong. And then he finished to decent effect. And a lot of people watched that race, and the thing they took out of it was the way that he rattled home. And as a result, he's been, a bit of a public horse for the race. I tend to go with you. I thought, I was against him in the Lockage. He's the bottom line with him prior to that is the reason people have been talking up Le Brevido goes back 2 years to when he won at Royal Ascot. He won the Jersey Stakes. Now, in terms of that race, it was an impressive performance. If you watch it back, he wasn't in the right part of the track. He did a lot of running in the last furlong to get on top. But the Jersey is the Jersey. It's a Group 3. We're talking one of the major Group 1s of the season here. And I think we've rather allowed Le Brevido, who's been injured since as well. He had one run in 18 months, to be overhyped. He was second in the French Guineas. So he clearly stays a mile, and he ran on well at the end of the Lockage. But as with you, I just wonder whether his form really, even the pick of his form, entitles him to be as short as he is for this race. There are 2 or 3 horses with stronger form claims to me.
Yeah, I'm a bit tongue-in-cheek saying he's a ridiculously priced favourite, but I can't really make an argument that off the back of his Lockings run, he should head the betting. And for all that, it wouldn't be a surprise, personally, were he to go and win the Queen Anne, but I couldn't possibly back him heading the market based upon what he has, or already what he hasn't achieved to date so far. For all there was as much encouragement I felt in his Lockings run in the way he finished as there was holes you could pick in him as a horse and what he does, how warm he got beforehand, the trouble he finds early on in the race. But because that is what he does. He's a horse who is always, for me, going to find some issues. And look, were he 14-1, of course, it'd be a different story, but he's not. He heads that betting. Mustachioy should be favourite based upon his lock-ins run. For me, for all I couldn't get too. Well, I say that, and then I'm looking at Lawrence, 5-time Group 1 winner. For she's never quite done it against the Colts. But either way, I would put those two personally ahead of Libravido in the back.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the lock-ins is a lot of people said before the race, and indeed straight afterwards, what a poor bunch of minors we have. But actually, I thought the lock-ins form was pretty good. Certainly, Mustachioy's performance in winning that on the day, because he won by 2.5 lengths, was as a top-notch performance over the mile. And if you dig through the history of these horses, even go back a couple of seasons, you struggle to find many better performances than that. The issue with backing Mustachioy at a short price, of course, is that he's not a young horse, and he's got one Group 1 win in his entire career, and only 2 Group 1 runs. He was unplaced in the other one, so you could argue that you're backing him on the basis of one run in a long career. But of course, we know that Aidan O'Brien can improve horses from other yards, and you wouldn't underestimate his chances of getting Libravido to win at Royal Ascot. But similarly, Mustachioy is trained by Sir Michael Stout, who is the trainer par excellence when it comes to getting horses to improve season by season and hit their peak as older horses. So I see no reason why he won't go on again. And I'd agree with you. I think he should be favourite. It's not the kind of horse you put in at 2-1 or thereabouts, simply because he hasn't been doing it over and over again. But there's no reason to doubt the lock-ins run. I thought he was very impressive there. He wasn't reliant on the run of the race. I think Lawrence will clearly get closer to him, because she gave every indication that she wasn't quite fit on the day. She blew up, and then she stayed on again late. But he rather swamped her for speed. At the prices, I might be tempted to go with her. I don't think there's an awful lot between the two of them, but I think Mustachioy deserves to be slightly shorter. And those are the pair that I'd be interested in.
Dees, this is surely a race, without me putting words in your mouth, that you're fancying something at a price, because we know you like to get stuck into something at a price, and this, well, for me, I am, and this feels as though there could just be something lurking, as we had last year with Accidental Agent, where we could take advantage of that.
Nothing at a huge price, Tom. No, I agree with everything you say about Libravido and Mustachioy. Like Libravido is probably priced that way because of his trainer. The one I kind of was looking at, and he's not a huge price now, but was Barney Roy. I think he has run we all know the story about him going to stud and coming back now, and he failed at stud. He's back with Charlie Appleby now. Ran a good race first time out. Sorry, I can't remember. He ran a good race first time out. He looked a bit like he was lacking a bit of fitness, but his run in France the last time I thought was very impressive. I think he looked back to his best. He was boxed in against the rail in the final furlong, and he just got a gap, I think, the last 200 yards and absolutely bolted out and got home very fast. I think it's this is a very open race, and I think it is a poor enough race. I think maybe Lawrence, Barney Roy, and maybe Accidental Agent would be the three I'd be looking at. But I think Barney Roy, I think at his best, he would have beaten all of these easily. I think that Charlie Appleby will have him spot on for this, and I think he's after contracting price a small bit since yesterday. He's 8.2 now, but he was the one I came down for on this. I think that's the one I'll be backing. I'll maybe see on the day who lines up if there's something at a bigger price, but Barney Roy was the one I decided on for this.
Well, his Zaki form is very strong, and he did look impressive last time, I thought. His life has obviously taken rather a sharp turn, having gone to stud with everything fully intact, and now all of a sudden he's back in training in a box with two very important things missing. But he might be a better horse as a result.
Yeah, of that. His St James's Palace win there a few years ago was a great win. Like, I mean, I actually watched again yesterday. I know that Churchill was probably not at his best that day, but they both started the run at the same time, and Barney Roy ended up beating him by 4.5 lengths. I mean, he absolutely flew home in the final furlong, and I think he was a real top class horse. That's why they took him away to stud so fast. He doesn't seem to be showing too many of the ill effects of it.
Can I just say he's just won. He's been beaten in one listed race and won another. There's a long, and that's good placing by Charlie Appleby, because he's been off the track for so long that he doesn't have to worry himself about running just in Group 1s. But I think if you thought he was back to his best in France last time out, he wasn't beating much, was he? I know he's won it comfortably. He showed that he's still got the appetite for the game, but in terms of the form he's shown, I thought it's almost a stone below what he'd need to show here. Now, I wouldn't say he can't do it. I think he's an interesting horse given the form he showed before. But you'd need to be looking at the records of horses who've failed at stud and come back and see how many of them showed the same level of form afterwards. I think plenty of them showed very good form, but I think most horses who've beaten stud, failed, and come back have ended up being not quite as good as they had been by definition. That would be my worry with him.
I know he was a half-length winner, but I was just what kind of caught my eye was how he had no runs on the race. He was boxing in the rain, and he just came home in the last. It was well inside the last furlong when he got his gap and got through. I think this is a very open race, and I was going through yesterday, and there's not many that really jumped out at me as, I'll be backing him at the moment. I'd probably wait till the day before going in heavy in anything, but I thought that he was an interesting one, the way he is, and just based on his old form, I think he would have beaten a lot of these horses fairly easily.
The one that I like a big enough price really hinges on, I think, probably Zabil Prince, who isn't the horse, but whether or not he's going to go up in trip for the Prince of Wales, which I think he is after their comments after his run in France last time. And that will hopefully mean that Sharjah Bridge lines up here. And I know that the Lockinge, it was disappointing, but there is something about this straight Ascot Mile I think suits, and I can see him running. I can see it suiting him, and at the prices, I could probably back him. And whether or not the ground was a little bit quick last time, I don't know. His best form has probably come away from a very fast surface, although it wasn't lightning in the Lockinge. It's not easy to make excuses, but at the same time, at a big price. What is he, about 26.0, D, Sharjah Bridge?
25.0, yeah.
25. I mean, I could...
Close enough.
We saw it last year with Accidental Agent and the first two home, Lord Glitters as well. Really, horses with handicap form who are just suited by the straight mile. And sometimes, if you don't come to anything to bang towards the top of the market, this track can really suit a horse who just loves it here. He obviously won at the back end of last year, the Balmoral, and I could probably have a nibble at him. For all he's got a fair bit to find, I know, Rory. But that does depend, and we're going to discuss it, on whether or not Zabil Prince is going to go up in trip. But I think that's likely.
Yeah, as you said, reading between the lines with the comments made by connections, given they're in the same ownership as well, you would expect them to go that way, and he would have looked an interesting one before the Lockinge. It's just a case of trying to find an excuse for that poor run. There doesn't seem to be one.
I couldn't. I really tried. I've been through it, but I couldn't. It's sometimes frustrating. You want to find a reason.
Yeah, I mean, I could excuse Beat the Bank's run in the Lockinge because he was drawn right on the inside. I don't think that was any help to him at all, and he was a bit free as well and didn't get home. I think he's better than that suggests. Not that I want to back him for this race, but I think you can kind of make an excuse. Just looking back at the race again, the only conclusion you would really come to with Sharjah Bridge was he just found the step up to Group 1 company beyond him. For all he'd run very well before that, but of course he was beaten by Beat the Bank at Sandown, so even the collateral form hasn't worked out. But yeah, I agree with you regarding strong Ascot handicap form. If you're capable of winning handicaps on the straight track at Ascot of marks of 105 and above, then you've got a decent chance of being competitive in the Queen Anne in similar circumstances. And as you said, we saw that exactly last year. Well, what we tend to get with the Queen Anne that you don't get with a lot of Group 1 races tends to be a really strong pace. You tend to get a big field as well for whatever reason. It always looks open enough for people to have a go. So a lot of the horses still in will stand their ground. We could easily have 16 runners plus in this race, and it will feel like a big field handicap. So horses with form in those conditions, as long as they're classy enough, I've always got a chance of bridging the gap. And
I think I could certainly argue that nothing ran a better, not that it is a trial for this, but given what we know what suits Accidental Agent, you'd have to have been delighted with what he did in the Lockinge with regard to this perhaps suiting that little bit better. But he's going to be half the price he was last year, of course.
I think, yeah, I mean, even less than that. That's the one thing. I think you could have, if you wanted to back Accidental Agent here, you'd have been perfectly happy for him to have finished 8th or 9th at Newbury, because you still would have got the price, because he was a big price. He was 33s for the Lockinge. and he needed the run, and he could easily have finished nowhere while still training on perfectly well. And you'd have got a big price about him here, and we know that he's very well suited by a strongly run straight mile. And you could have made a very good argument for him at a big price. Now, of course, he's priced up as he's in the top 5 or 6 in the market, isn't he? So you've rather missed the boat in terms of getting massive value. But I suppose he's never going to be a terribly sexy horse, and I think he's the kind of horse who, on the day, will probably drift to a bigger price.
Essentially, we should just be place laying Libravido, given everything we've said. We can't agree on anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see him picking up the pieces later on and grabbing a place. That's the one downside to him. I'd rather, if I'm laying something for a place, ideally the first thing you're looking for is just terrible value in the first place. A horse who's far too short based on his ability. But I'd also like one who's either going to win or blow out completely. And Libravido is one of those horses who could have no chance of winning after a furlong, none at all, and then still somehow scrape a place, and that would be really annoying. And that's the way I see him running here. The one thing in his favour, he's got winning form at Royal Ascot. He was very strong in the finish, and he was strong in the finish again, proving that he really does stay a stiff mile last time out. So I can see him coming from a bad position to nick a place. But in saying that, if he shortens up any further on the day, then I will be strongly considering putting him in as a place lay on the old Matchbook blog.
That is Libravido heads to betting currently. I think we all agree that there's no value in his price currently. Dees mentions Barney Roy. I quite fancy. The horse is probably going to do well to get a place, Sharjah Bridge, but at the prices, I think is potentially worth siding with. Moving on to the King Stand, there's another horse at the top of the betting, Micháel, who I'm not quite sure should be there for. He was very impressive last time, but rattle through the prices and then kick us off, Dees, with who you fancy for the race.
Yeah, that horse is Batash. Batash is now 3.3. Blue Point is 4.5. Nab's Cross is 9.0. Sorga Prokofiev is 12.0. Soldier's Call is 15.0. Imprimis is 15.0, and its bigger prices the rest. So Perfect Invincible Army bound for an overall 21.0.
And what about what's your view on Batash, who looked as good as ever when winning the Temple last time, the race he won last year, but then he was below form seemingly in this race last year?
Yeah, it's hard to support him in Ascot, I suppose. I think when we were talking about him at Haydock, we were saying that Ascot and York just didn't seem to suit him. I think there was too much noise or whatever, and he just blew up. Again, I'd fancy, I know the same as yourself, I'd fancy Blue Point for this. I think he was a good winner of it last year. Of course, distance form. Not a lot of juice in his price now, he's 4.5, but I could see him being made out for this, and it's obviously one of his big targets for the year, so I'm going to keep it simple and go for a Blue Point in this.
I think I agree with you on Blue Point. I think this is his track. I'm not sure really a Maidan, certainly not a Maidan 5 is his thing. I think it's a bit too swift for he was good there. I think he was nearly track record good there at the start of his campaign out of Maidan. Then he was very good in the Alcoz. But I think an Ascot 5 is ideal for him. But just on Batash, I feel he's the perfect Rory horse to support or go against as the year develops. Because for me, he's not going to go throughout the year unbeaten. And the tracks don't play to his strengths as to where they fall, given what he's previously done. For example, Haydock 5, ideal. He goes and wins. He turns up at a stiff 5, which is Ascot. He's going to head the betting because he's won at Haydock, so you go against him. He then goes to Goodwood off the back of that, where all of a sudden his price looks interesting because he's got done at Ascot, but Goodwood suits him, so he wins. He then goes to York. That's a blowout, but he goes off favourite because he's won at Goodwood, so we go against him. And then who knows what happens in France, but you're well up, so you're away.
Yeah, I mean, this is, unfortunately, that's a great battle plan for last season. Everyone is rather caught on to the pattern in Batash's form. He's a strange one. He's got two ways of running, but both ways are good. In that when he's having an off day, we talk about Batash as if he finishes tailed off half the time, and he doesn't. I mean, we're knocking him for his performance in this last year while also tipping Blue Point up to win. And anyone who reads a race, who watches this race last year and is asked who was the best horse on the day, they'll say Batash was. absolutely set it up for Blue Point last year. He got no cover at all, and he blasted off in front. He was just doing too much all the way through the race, and he was still a close second. So the problem with being against them is you must understand what price he should be. And I would, if you said, I'd like to be against Batash in this race, I would not argue with you at all. If you say, I don't think Batash should be favourite for this race, I'd say you're bonkers, because he clearly should be favourite for this race. It's just a case of finding out what price he should be favourite at. And, you know, bigger than 2-1 is too big to be taking him on, because he is absolutely different class to all of these, including Blue Point on his day. And the question is whether he can cope with the stiff 5 at Ascot. And the answer to that is, much as it was at Haydock, look at the horses who went out front at Haydock. Look at Kashi, for example, who's a very, very talented sprinter, fell in a hole. And it's not like Haydock's a really easy 5 furlongs. Everyone gets home there. Well, they don't. If you go too fast at Haydock, you will fall in a hole late in the day. And that's obviously true at Ascot as well. And the key to Batash at Haydock was that Jim Crowley tried to get him to slightly miss the break and then put him behind another horse. It didn't really work at Haydock, in a manner of speaking, because the field was so small and they rather split that within a furlong he'd seen daylight and he'd pulled himself to the front. What Jim needs to do at Ascot is make sure that he can track someone fast in the first furlong or two, because Batash is fundamentally a 4 furlong horse, isn't he? Once he sees daylight, he wants to go, and he will go hell for leather for 4 furlongs, and then he can't quite maintain that. His speed over, you know, the first 2 or 3 furlongs of a race is exceptional, or when he's asked to quicken, he's asked to lengthen, his speed is tremendous. But he's not the kind of horse who keeps anything in reserve. So if he goes off in front, he's vulnerable to finishers. But Jim knows that now, and he knows that what he needs to do is just to get some cover, just for a furlong or two, you know, even for the first furlong, just to stop him being in top gear throughout the race, and then he can give him his head. And if he does that, he wins this. Again, I'm not keen to back him if he's an odds-on shot. I was against him at Haydock on the understanding that, you know, he doesn't always show his form, and it's not that obvious why he should and why he shouldn't. You can say he doesn't like York. I can't see why he'd be effective at Haydock and not at York. Other than you have this issue of having to walk across the track to get to the stables, and that can get them a bit lit up. But he was fine at Ascot last year. You know, obviously he is full of himself. He's always liable to get above himself pre-race, but he can just about hold that in. And in the race last year, you know, most people who saw it will just say he's just done slightly too much in front. If he'd been ridden with a tad more restraint, he would have won the race. So I don't want to be against him at a price bigger than 2-1, because I think he's a better horse than Blue Point. Blue Point, we've got to remember, is not ideally suited by 5 furlongs at Ascot. I would say that's obviously arguable because he won this race last year. But I think largely he won this last year because it was an absolute burn-up. They went a ridiculous speed from the start because of Batash. And Blue Point was perfectly ridden in his slipstream just to be able to be pulled through the race, and then was pulled out later on to show a turn of foot. In the none thought were 5 furlongs at York against lesser horses generally, Batash had a bit of an off day. Blue Point still looked like he was uncomfortable at 5 furlongs. He couldn't go the gallop there before staying on. And he's going to be slightly vulnerable still at Ascot. You know, his form, you know, his very best form is at 6 furlongs now. 5 at Ascot is certainly within his compass. He'd arguably be better at 5 than 6 at Ascot because of the nature of the track, but it's not absolutely perfect for him. And what we're boiling down to now is that with the pair of them reasonably short, and to be honest, I think there's only 3 horses you can make a strong case for in this race.
The other one being Mabs Cross.
Mabs Cross. You know, I said at the start of the season, I know she was third at Haydock. She's been given a penalty away in her first 2 starts this season. That is a very hard thing for a mare to do. She's back on, I was going to say level terms, she's back receiving weight now from the older horses. She can't beat Batash if he runs exactly to the form of Haydock, but she will be better. She is ideally suited to a stiff 5, a really strongly run 5 on a big field like this. Suits her ideally, and she doesn't have an electric turn of foot, but she keeps going. So an uphill finish suits her really well too, as we saw at Newmarket. So she will definitely get closer to Batash if he's at his best. If he's not at his best, she will beat him. And she's got a chance of beating Blue Point as well. She was, she was beaten, a head for second in this race last year? A neck, rather. And I think, from what we saw at Newmarket, I think she's a slightly better filly this year. So she does not have a huge amount to find. And whenever we get a place market up for this as well, I wouldn't be surprised if either Blue Point or Batash disappointed. I'd be more surprised if Mabs Cross did. I think she's virtually guaranteed a place, and you're certainly gonna be getting odds against about that. So that's the way I'd be inclined to play it. If I don't see, given how well we know Batash, that he's going to be backed into odds on for this. I think there's going to be enough competition between him and Blue Point. They might get reasonably close for favoritism in the end. And I definitely wouldn't want to be laying Batash at that kind of price, given that he is simply the best 5 furlong horse around on his day. I think you've got to take him on at the right time. I think you're absolutely right about that, Tom. But unfortunately, the market makers have already cottoned on to how to price him up for certain races, and he'll be a bigger price than his rating suggests he should be for this race. So it's a little bit harder to lay him.
Because it's Ascot, because he got beaten in the race last year, and I think the point about Blue Point as well. I do think I do think this track over 5 is ideal for him, but I also think that the race last year worked out ideally, given that he was drawn 1 stall away from Batash, and Lady Aurelia was very close by as well. I think she was a couple away. And it really set up ideally for him. Now, if you had Blue Point, say, out on a wing, for example, that could be a slight concern.
Yes.
But Batash, interestingly, I think 5 of his last 6 wins have come when he has been drawn on a wing. I don't know if there's anything in that. Widest twice at Haydock, stall 1 both times at Goodwood. I'm not sure. Perhaps that is just coincidence. But I worry about him. I think you're completely right. If he gets out at Ascot and he can't be harnessed early, that could be race over.
Yes.
I've sort of set my stall out quite early to say I wouldn't back him at Ascot, give or take. If he turned up here at 5 to 1, well, all of a sudden, yes. I agree that he's out and out sprinter. I think he is the best. He's rated the best, and I think he is the best. But I have those track concerns. Mabs Cross, I absolutely agree with. I think she's definitely better this year based upon what she did at Newmarket. They were really quite surprised that because she was expected to really need that she won in the way she did at Newmarket. Last time, I don't find it too hard up against a peak Batash at Haydock to make excuses, but I do think this stiff 5 is ideal for her. Is she? Do you say she's 11.0 Ds? Mabs Cross.
Mabs Cross is 9.0.
Is she 9?
Oh, okay.
Against the 2, I think so much is going to depend on the draw for me in this race. If Blue Point is drawn in the middle of the pack, very close to Batash, I think my strongest case could be for him. But he's akin to Mabs Cross for me in that they're going to want the race to play out quite similarly.
Yes.
And a lot's going to depend on Batash's price. But the way I'd position it at the moment is I'd still want to take on the horse at the top of the market with the 2 in behind, Blue Point and Mabs Cross, personally. And I hate pigeonholing races as 3-horse races when we're talking about 3-horse, but I struggle to see anything beating those top 3.
Well, you're certainly going to need either them all to somehow run below form, or you're going to have something that improves a good £10 and more below them, which looks a little unlikely. But possible. Things have happened before, and of course it's not always easy to get a real handle on the foreign horses here either, is it? So I guess the market will be fairly careful with horses like Imprimis and even Bound for Nowhere if he runs. And
I think Equilateral, just on him, whether he runs or not, could be fascinating as well, because I think there is a chance that horse will hit the front at some point. And I don't think this is going to be his track. I'm not certain he's definitely going to go, but if he does, I'll be looking at where he's drawn as well, because I think he could have an impact on the race.
Yeah, well, he's always had a massive reputation, Equilateral, and he's been disappointing through most of his career. He'll win minor races in blindingly impressive style, and then when he steps up and he's really fancied, he's rather blown it. But although he was beaten by Mavs Cross last time out, he only went down very narrowly, and he certainly ran his best race, and that might be, the sign that he's maturing as a sprinter. And a lot of sprinters don't really hit full maturity until they're 5 and older. So the fact that he's had quite a lot of racing is not a sign that he's fully exposed. So he could do better equilateral, and they've always thought the world of him, as you can tell from the prices he started for his races.
I hope that in-depth sort of preview into how the race might shape up has helped. For all, we've sort of not nailed our colours to a mast officially because of where we are. We don't have the draw. I think it sort of hopes it points you in the right direction of how the race might shape up.
I think you've got to look at where they're drawn, as you said, to see who's on a wing or who's drawn away from the other principals. It'd also be interesting to see if Batash is drawn next to something with a lot of early speed, because that's what we know what Jim's going to want to do. He's going to want to try to get a windbreak early on, get the horse tucked in. But if he's drawn next to something that hasn't got the speed to pull him through the race, then that could actually count against him. If Jim wants to take a pull at the start, if he sticks him behind the wrong horses, then that could be disastrous for him as well. So you need to look at that and work out who's going to go forward and how that's going to affect the principals in the race. And we'll only really find that out when we see the draw. But it lets you know what the variables are at least.
Moving on to the St James's Palace at 4:20 on day one. It's just a belting Tuesday, Royal Ascot. This is traditionally a race where those right at the top of the market have done very well for a number of reasons. And I won't forget, Dees, you sending me a message in about February asking about Phoenix of Spain because you backed him for the Guineas, and he went and won the Irish version. But he's right towards the top of that market. He has to be. And it'd be fascinating to see if he and Too Darn Hot turn up again. Is Phoenix of Spain a clear favourite?
He is, yeah. He's very strong at the top of the market. He's 2.78. Too Darn Hot is now 5.0. Magna Grecia 7.4. King of Comedy is 9.0. Scardo is 12. Decrypt is 13.0, and Shaman Mad Moon are 22.0. Big price the rest.
Will you back Phoenix of Spain, or have you recovered from him not showing up at Newmarket?
I would have recovered from him not showing up at Newmarket, but I don't think I'll ever recover from him winning the Irish one at 17.0 or something. I'd be thinking about that for a while. He's very short for this. He's 2.78. Like, I didn't want to back him at 17.0 last day for the Irish Guineas, so I couldn't be backing him at 2.78. Although I think this race could be a bit like the King Stanley, where the top three are really the ones making the market and making the race. Like, there's question marks now about Too Darn Hot. Magna Grecia as well just ran terrible at the Curragh. You've Scardo and Decrypt. Are they going to be good enough to improve to win this? And it's not a race I had a huge strong opinion on. I was looking through it now yesterday. I think Phoenix of Spain deserves to be where he is. Just because of that the Guineas and the Curragh, but 2.78 is a very sharp price, and the only one I was looking at really could potentially improve was King of Comedy, but you told me he mightn't even run in this race now. Well,
this is before we went on. I'm not certain he's going to. John Gosden had concerns after Sandown. This was the horse. He's clearly very talented, but he's half nuts as well. He has got a lot of learning to do, both before the race and during the race as well. He looks ungainly late on. He still doesn't use himself, I think, physically to the best of his ability, yet he's still winning. And also, he's always keen and warm on the way down to the start as well. And there were concerns on Matchbook Brigadier Gerard and I, this horse on, that both he and the horse feature, whether they take in Ascot, whether they'd be able to sort of handle the amphitheatre that is Ascot, because he's clearly got his mental issues, but he's clearly very talented as well. Off the back of what we saw last time, I think he'll probably go. I just have, depending on what Too Darn Hot does, but I'd have concerns, Dees, about how he handles it. I'd almost want to see him beforehand, just to sort of make sure he's not completely lost the plot, if you like. But otherwise, what price did you say he was?
He's 9.0, which isn't the great price from either. Really, like this is the race that I'd be having a bet on. I think before Ascot, I wait till the day, but he was just the one that kind of stood out to me near the top of the market. again, I just have to see who turns up. I mean, like even Too Darn Hot, if he 5.0, that's a fairly juicy price. Back down to my list, might be better for him, you know. But
Is he 5.0 Too Darn Hot?
5.0, yeah.
I mean, that's I don't know.
You see,
That's almost half tempting me for all I.
yeah, like
But he is there could be a price there, Rory, where you go, hang on, this is the best rated 2-year-old since Frankel. This is a horse that he's had real setbacks early season, but there should be a point, there should be a race where suddenly this season we go, that's Too Darn Hot. I'm just not sure when it's going to happen.
I think he's got every chance of landing a Group 1 at some stage, but I don't think we're suddenly going to see. I think we are seeing the animal we saw last year. I think that's the whole point, that he was much more precocious than all his siblings, and he showed all his talent last year. That's why he was so good as a 2-year-old. It wasn't about the promise of things to come. It's because he was doing everything he possibly could do as a 2-year-old, and looking very good about it. And you know, he was probably a little bit better than the better result in the Dante. And you could argue that the Irish Guineas came plenty quick enough on the back of that, but he ran his race. You know, so the fact is he's run 2 very good races this season. The evidence suggests that he hasn't grown as much as some of the others. I mean, I'd imagine I didn't see him in Phoenix of Spain in the paddock at the Curragh, but I'd imagine Phoenix of Spain is a more impressive looking individual now than Too Darn Hot is. And I think it'd be interesting to see them in the paddock at Ascot. So Too Darn Hot has already shown such a high level of form that, you know, he will find a decent race coming his way if he stands training. But I think the idea of him being head and shoulders above the others was all about maturity, and when we've seen that, you know, time and time again in the past, 2-year-olds who, you know, are bred to do better at 3, but are just really precocious. And we kid ourselves that they're going to improve as much as they would if they were having 2 runs in maidens.
I think that,
you know,
just on that, but I think that is the point with Too Darn Hot, is because of his mother and his sisters. We expected that this horse was doing something that he wasn't necessarily expected to do at 2. But if we take him as an individual case study, and he wasn't related to those horses, you could have just said, well, he's a very precocious 2-year-old. He's up to size and scratch with everything else at 2, and he's the best 2-year-old, but perhaps he's not going to train on. But I certainly did rule that out and said, well, this horse is bred to be a middle distance horse next year, and therefore he's only going to improve. My God, he's the second coming. And actually that he's always belied his pedigree, and that hasn't happened. And perhaps we're finding out, for all John Gosden will quite rightly say, look, things have not gone to plan this year. I've never quite got him right. But perhaps we're finding out that, as opposed to what his siblings and his mother did, unfortunately, last year was his year, and this year others may just improve past him.
Yeah, I mean, he's still. That's not to say that he won't in the autumn pick up something decent, you know, and he could come back and win the QE2 by 5 lengths come the end of the year. And John Gosden is a tremendous trainer when it comes to showing the requisite patience. And in saying that, I would find I'd rather see him give the horse a little bit of a mid-season break, and, you know, get him to peak again for the autumn. But, you know, the trainer knows best. But you know, this will be 3 fairly quick runs if he comes here on the back of a setback, and you just wonder whether he's, you know, you're creating a pattern for him for the rest of the year. And again, you know, there are plenty of people out there who will say that he stayed 1.25 miles perfectly well at York. And I think Gosden, it's interesting what his response was, because I thought he was very implicitly critical of Frankie after the race. You know, Frankie said, oh, they're going too fast, and I didn't want to lay up with them. And Gosden made the point that the pace was clearly not too fast. He wasn't fooled by that at all. And he said Frankie, you know, didn't want to use the pacemaker. He allowed Telecaster to use his pacemaker instead. And he ran very well in the circumstances. And Frankie said he got tired in the last half furlong and didn't stay. But you get the impression that he felt that if Frankie had done what Oisin Murphy did, then Frankie would have won the race. And if he'd won the Dante, then no one would be talking about him being a non-stayer at that trip. So he could easily step up again for the International back at York. or something like that. And as I said, I wouldn't be surprised to see him win anything. I would just try to get out of the way of thinking that he is, 6 or 7 pounds better than everything else because he was last season. That's definitely flawed logic now.
So just on Phoenix of Spain,
yes,
is he the good thing of day one? How do you approach?
I'm half inclined to say that he is. I mean, I think you're getting, as Micháel was saying, maybe 2.78 at the moment. You're going to get a bit bigger than that, because there's going to be enough support for Tudor if he shows up, for Magna Grecia as well. People don't believe that. Well, Magna Grecia didn't run to the same level in the Irish Guineas as they had at Newmarket. He could easily bounce back. Tudor still has that big reputation. If King of Comedy turns up, he will have his supporters as well. He's coming the same route as last year's winner from the same stable as well, without Parole, who won the Heron Stakes before this. So I think you'll actually get a price on Phoenix of Spain. He's always been a reasonable price in his races. He was really impressive when he won the Acomb at York last season, if you remember. And on the back of that, he was still very easy to back on his next start. Obviously, he was beaten by Too Darn Hot in the Champagne Stakes, but he was a surprisingly big price there, considering how well he'd won at York. And I think he'll always be opposed in the market. But what I saw at the Curragh was that he was by far the best horse on the day. It's not, he won by 3 lengths. He didn't steal the race from the front, did he? No. It was a very, very good ride. And Jimmy Spencer deserves an awful lot of credit for getting him off the inside very early on, so that he wasn't crowded next to the rail. And then he's dictated at the pace that he wanted. But it wasn't a really slow pace, and then he's done them for a turn of foot. He didn't go hell for leather in front. He went a reasonable pace, and he held it a bit back from the finish. And if he'd held on by a length or half a length or something like that, you could say, oh, the ride's won on the race there. He's won by 3 lengths, and he's going further away at the line. So you have to say he's the best 3-year-old at this trip we've seen this season. And for that reason, I would not want to be against him here. Again, it's always interesting what the draw does in this race, because as a rule, it's a lot harder to win from the inside. Although I think Without Parole was drawn low last year, given the way the race pans out. You don't want to be stuck on the rail around the bend here on a biggish field. But again, Spencer showed at the Curragh that he knows when that's an issue, and he knows how to get away from it. So I think he'd be wise to that again. But yeah, he looks a really, really strong favourite to me, and I think there are reasons to believe that his price will be bigger than it should be, because people will stay loyal to horses who've beaten them in the past.
I wholeheartedly agree with what you said on Phoenix of Spain. I think that Too Darn Hot's price is based upon Ireland shorter than it probably should be, really, because of what he did as a 2-year-old. I, like you, would love to see him just skip this and perhaps come back. The first time we see him again would be in a Sussex or something like that, just a little bit later on. I think this is, again, 24 days after the Curragh. It's still just quick enough that I couldn't quite side with him. For me, the most disappointing horse in Ireland was Scardu, just because I had a little vested interest in him, and I couldn't really find excuses on the day, and he didn't match up to his Newmarket run. But then nor did Magna Grecia, but there we are.
Yeah. You'd almost rather that one of those, if you wanted to support them, ran even worse than that. So you could say it was too bad to be true. But the fact that they finished 4th and 5th
wasn't bad enough, was it?
It wasn't bad enough to want to make excuses for. So yeah, they got a little bit to prove. And Scardu might have been. I mean, you can argue that was still Scardu's best ever performance. I think the positive with him going in was that he come to hand very early, and he was impressive, stepping up to Group Company for the first time in the Craven. He was just ahead of the curve a little bit at that stage, and now 1 or 2 horses have caught him up. But we'll see. He's still lightly raced. He might take a step forward again, but I think he's a hard horse to back at this stage.
More how he finished his race in comparison to Newmarket. I know he wasn't beaten too far. It was even the mix for second, but it was more how he off. But Phoenix Spain, I think, is a very fair price at this stage. The last race we're going to look at in this initial instalment of our Ascot preview is the Prince of Wales. Dees, kick us off with prices for that if you can, first of all. Again, some unknowns as to what is definitely going to turn up at this stage, but a filly heads the betting.
A filly heads the betting. Filly's the top 2 of the market. Sia Class is 3.55. Magical is 4.2. Crystal Ocean is 7.2. Massar, so all the guys is 7.4. Massar is 14.0. Thunder Snow is 16.0. And then you have Gayat and Old Persian at 22.0.
So if I kick us off on Sia Class, who I absolutely adore, and there was talk about her starting off in the Middleton. That obviously didn't go to plan. I think she's possibly going to be able to go somewhere for a gallop before running in this, which is still her intended target. But for a filly who has shown her best, I think over a mile and a half, having her first go in this, I'm not certain I could steam in, if you like, and I'd be wanting, from a betting perspective, for all my heart would love to see her win this and go on for a repeat attempt at an art where she was undoubtedly slightly unlucky last year. I'm just not sure I could back her at this stage in a Group 1 over 10 first up this season personally. So I'd be looking for something at a bigger price. But just get your opinions, Rory, first of all, on Sia Class.
Yeah, I'd want to see her this season before I wanted to back her. You know, again, it's the issue with how well you train on, and she was very impressive all last season. But I'm not sure physically how she's going to go on from one season to the next. I'm not certain about that. I'm not suggesting that she's not going to improve again. I just don't really know, and I think it's very difficult with fillies until you see them run as 4-year-olds. You're never quite sure whether they're as good. I've seen some one of the best fillies I ever saw was Habibti, who was absolutely unbeatable as a 3-year-old sprinter. She was something else, and she stayed in training at 4, and she probably ran to a similar level, but she wasn't getting the 3-year-old allowance, and she looked utterly beatable. It was a hard lesson for a young race fan to take, that the mighty can fall like that. And
that would be very sad if she didn't. It would hurt Rory if she didn't progress in this 4-year-old campaign, or at least run bang up to what she did last year.
And you'd hope she would, given that she wasn't, unlike Habibti, she wasn't campaigned as a reasonably hard as a 2-year-old. So she's only in her second season racing, and she really ought to progress again. But it's really hard. It's hard to gauge where you are with really top class fillies from one year to another, because of weight for age, they do need to physically improve. And I'd like to see her first. So I find it difficult to back her. I wouldn't be telling people that you got to take her on, but at those prices, yeah, I'd probably have to press the lay button on her. Especially as you don't want to be coming back for Ascot. You want things to go smoothly. You want your filly to come to hand early, so you can run her where you want. You know what specifically the issue is, or it's just a case that she's not quite been ready until now?
I don't know. It was definitely original plan, as I understand it, was Middleton on to Prince of Wales. Yeah. I don't know why she missed York. It's not as obvious as something Enable wise, where they said she did a piece of work which wasn't sparkling, and they're going to bring her back for an eclipse. Whereas I don't know with Sea of Class, but it's not ideal. And furthermore, they clearly didn't want to start her off in race conditions in this, and therefore she is, and therefore. But my issue is going down with her. So I approached it thinking, right, I want to take her on. For all I love her, 10 furlongs, first race of the season in this, not going to be ideal. But then you go through Magical won a Group 1 last time only by title, but she beat Flag of Honour again at 2-7. We didn't learn a huge amount. Valgeist, probably that was potentially a career best last time, but maybe Talismanic was the previous year. But I've never fully warmed to him as a horse that's proper a Group 1 level against the very best in the world. Massar, last year's Investec Derby winner, he's making his reappearance if he turns up in this.
Yeah.
Better over a mile and a half. Gaiath was my horse for this, but last time was very disappointing. Old Persian won't go here. Thunder Snow, don't know. And then all of a sudden, I can't find anything that's going to beat the top one. So I'm sort of running out of options as I progress through the race.
Yes, it's not, and there's a lot of these are not going to turn up, as you say, and it's not easy. But yeah, I couldn't back her as favourite. I just think looking at ratings for fillies first time out at 4 is dangerous. You can't rely on them. I mean, some of them step forward again and are even better at 4 than they are at 3. But you just got to look at Enable's kind of. she's sort of an example of why you got to be careful, because if you'd backed an Ante Post for anything last year, you were doing your money in the first half of the season. And although she's ended up winning, she was brilliantly handled by John Gosson last year to win a couple of Group 1s, but she wasn't in the same form as she had been the previous year, but for various reasons. And there are just issues that come along. So especially with Sia Class having missed an intended prep, I have to be very wary. Kind of agree with you, Waldgeist. He's not your brilliant 1.25 mile horse, is he? He's a really tough utility middle distance horse.
I still think 1.5 miles is probably
yes. Yeah, I mean that's what I would say. He's capable enough of stepping back, and obviously he looked as good as ever when he won the Ghana last time out, which is extended 1.25 miles. But I wouldn't be falling over myself to back him at the very top level here. I'd be inclined to go with Magical. I think she's there aren't too many negatives with her. She's clearly at least as good as ever this season.
Best at 1.5 miles, or she's proved herself at 10.
She's proved herself. I mean, the fact that she's been given 3 runs at 10 this season, and she's shown the same level of form as she was over 1.5 miles. Well, arguably she's improved. So time forms certainly have all her runs this season. They rate her higher than for winning the Fillion Mare stakes at Ascot last October, which would surprise a few people, because obviously she's been up against lesser opposition, but she's travelled very well in her races. And she's never been troubled to win. And arguably that, the Tattersalls Gold Cup was a disappointing Group 1 last time out, it has to be said. But she won it by half the track. And she won it in a very smart time as well. So everything about that race suggested the 1.25 miles is absolutely fine. I know she improved the step up to 1.5 miles at the end of last season, but it's not necessarily the step up and trip that she improved for. And you did that interview with Aidan O'Brien after the Derby when he talked about Galileo. And the more work you give them, the more they say, give me more. And horses who seem to be fully exposed suddenly improve. Well, I say suddenly improve. They just keep progressing when you think they can't possibly improve any further. And Magical is the perfect example of that, of a Galileo mare who just keeps thriving. And she's looked as good as ever this season. And of course, she's been kept to 10 furlongs. So this trip should be, on a stiff track, I don't think will be any kind of problem to her at all. And there are no questions about her preparation, whereas almost the rest of the field, you've got questions about their preparation, don't you?
Well, that's where I am at the moment. Dees, something concrete for us?
No, I think you've covered it fairly well. Like it's not a grey race. Like Sia Class, you couldn't be piling into her. I think this is probably, it's weird to say that she's using a Royal Ascot race as kind of the first step towards the arc. Like this is maybe just the first step to better targets later in the season. Magical, like I think Rory hit the nail on the head there now. Like she's the best form in the race by a mile, but she's beaten a horse that's a stayer who's like a 1 mile 6 horse a few times this year now. Like it's kind of hard to get a grip in the form there. Wallace is a bit like the French rugby teams. He's not great away from home. You're going down through. Like I was looking for something at a bigger price, and Elarkham was the only one I was kind of thinking about, but he'd have to improve an awful lot. I was going to mention him.
Yeah, I'm still clinging to this being a good horse, and he was better last time.
He was. I mean, I thought that was a big step in the right direction for Elarkham at Goodwood, and I think he's one of those. He disappointed last season, and even on his return. But I thought, even though it was only a listed race last time, I thought you could definitely make a clear an argument that with confidence restored from that win, he could just be the kind of horse to belatedly make the mark that they expected him to do last year.
Yeah, and he's 33.0 at the moment, which is a decent price when you consider that out of the top 10 in the market, like 5 of them might run, and 3 of the other 5 aren't, are probably overpriced or aren't running great. He was the only one. Regal Reality as well, just based on I thought she won very well in the Brigadier's Yard meeting, and it is the same form as Post Word went into it last year. He is 25.0.
I'm not sure. He's the one though that I'm not sure he'll definitely go based upon the issues that he caused at Sandown.
Yeah, see, this is.
He was so lit up, like he wouldn't go in the paddock. He didn't want to. They literally had to put a jacket over his head to get him on the track, like a coat. I've never seen that before. Because
I thought they'd all but ruled him out of the race afterwards.
Yeah, but Chris Richardson basically said it's. I think he'll come back for the Eclipse. To be honest, to go back to Sandown.
I thought they might go to York for the York Stakes, the mile and a quarter, isn't it? Yeah. So that's I got the impression that was the plan at that stage, that they wanted to keep him to slightly lesser company and slightly not the big days necessarily, given his temperament.
Not thousands of people in top hat and tails, basically. Although you'll have lots of options for jackets to put over his head.
Well, this is true. Yeah.
I try to take off your jacket at Royal Ascot unless it's over 35 degrees or something.
Just to finish up on Elarcam, he had a fracture after Salisbury. He was then described by his trainer as being fat for Newmarket, and he needed the run. And he was very good at Goodwood last time. But going back to Newmarket, that form was really strong. You've got Zabeel Prince won it. Forest Rangers come out and won since. Moustachery went out and won a Lockinge.
Yeah.
Elarcam was fourth. So then you have to almost give Zabeel Prince a little bit of a nudge. I know Moustachery had a penalty, but whether all that form is good enough to beat those at the top of the market, I'm not certain. But I'd probably be looking at that race, one of those two.
I'll tell you, I would say, again, we're talking about getting involved in this Ante Post and finding something that could shorten up. Just looking at the entries, Elarcam's going to run here, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because all his entries are well spaced, and they're for mile and a quarter races only. So he's in this, he's in the Eclipse, he's in the International. He's definitely going to run here. When he does turn up and it's a 7-runner race, people are going to look at him and go, do you know what? This horse could surprise people. And the 33 and the 25 will soon become 12 and 14. So I think in terms of backing something that's going to shorten up, which is half of your battle Ante Post, I think Elarcam might just be the interesting one here.
Yeah. You've talked me into it. I was sort of hovering, but I like that angle. Of the four we've covered, guys, Rory, starting with you, the four races we covered, the first four Group 1s between Tuesday and Wednesday. If there was one horse that you had to have on side now, where would you look? I know I've put you on the spot.
That I have to have on side now, or that I would have to have as a banker for the four? Because that's a very different question.
What's the easiest question? I don't know of those. Whichever one you like.
The one that makes most appeal as an Ante Post bet now, having just discussed it as Elarcam, because most of the others we're talking about likely winners of the race. You're going to be getting similar prices on the day, and with a couple of those races, you want to find information that you won't find out until declarations. Whereas with Elarcam, all the value in him is in the information you have at the moment, that he's a likely runner, and there are lots of potential non-runners in this race, and his price is only going to shorten. So in that respect, he's the standout.
Dees, for you, one horse. It can be a banker on the day, or it can be one to have on side now.
Yeah, I'm going to have to be very boring and stick with Elarcam. Like, out of the four races, he's the only one I think that you're getting value in the price now, that he will definitely run, and he will definitely be shorter on the day. Like, there are a few tough races there now that we've gone through, like, and there's two of them that are all about the favourites. So I'll go for Elarcam as well.
Okay, and I'm going to give you the Phoenix of Spain Good Thing as a horse that I think will be the banker of that first day. And
yeah, and I wouldn't argue with that. If you asked me for the banker, then I'd have gone Phoenix of Spain as well.
Okay, and I think on the first day against Le Bravido as a horse I really want to take on. I think you want to keep an eye on both of Roger Varian's horses, because I'm hoping that one of them, Zabeel Prince, doesn't show up and goes up in trip. And that means that we get a price about Sharjah Bridge over that course and distance where he's been successful over before. Good stuff. We're going to return for next week. That'll be our look at the rest of the meeting. We might give you some handicap shouts in there as well, just for good measure. That's our Ascot preview as far as the first couple of days go. So we've got four Group 1s. I think there's a nice even split of four to come as well. which we'll get stuck into next week. Dees, thank you very much indeed, sir. All the best.
Nice one, lads. Have a good weekend.
Rory, good luck with that move.
Thank you very much. I'll need it.
Godspeed. We wish you all the best. Thanks for joining us. We'll chat to you again next week. Bye for now.